Nan Rich, candidate for governor of the state of Florida. Nan is recognized as one of the most passionate and dedicated members of the Florida legislature. Nan Rich was first elected to the state Senate in 2004 after serving 2 terms in the House of Representatives. She was the first woman to be elected leader of the Senate Democrats, a position she held from 2010 until she was term limited in November 2012. During her term as leader of the state Democrats, Nan effectively worked across the aisle to build bipartisan coalitions on important legislation affecting public schools, protecting women's reproductive rights, and preventing prison privatization. Throughout her legislative service, Nan was a leading progressive advocate for children, women, seniors, and social justice issues. Among her lasting accomplishments is her role as a founder of the Guardian Ad Litem program for Dade County, in which she trained volunteers to act as advocates for abused and neglected children in court proceedings. Her work to expand support for home and community-based care programs for seniors has allowed thousands of Florida's frail elderly to remain in their homes so that they would not have to go into assisted living facilities and nursing homes. And throughout her tenure, Nan also was very outspoken and effective defender of women's health and reproductive rights. Nan is a long-time resident of South Florida. She attended the University of Florida. She is married to David, and they have 4 children and 3 grandchildren. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Nan Rich.
That's it. Thank you. Thank you so much for the beautiful introduction. And wow, that's all I have to say. And I'm told this is on the light side because we're in the summer. But I have to tell you, just a quick little, before I start, there was a tweet put up yesterday by a Republican blogger, and he made fun of the fact that I was coming here and that I was going to be the speaker. And he said, mockingly, "Are there any Democrats there in the villages?" So we can tell him there are lots of Democrats in the villages. So it's very exciting, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I was supposed to be here. We were scheduled once before, but I must tell you, I've been doing an incredible amount of traveling across this state, and it is a huge state with very poor intra-city air transportation, so we're in the car a lot. Actually, we've clocked about, we stopped counting at 135,000 miles. Let me just say that, as I mentioned, over the past 2 years, I was term limited in November of 2012. So I began thinking about what I was going to do, and I looked around at the possible Democrats. Actually, my primary opponent wasn't a Democrat at that time, so I wasn't looking at him. Anyway, I looked at the Democrats and I thought, you know, why not me? I've had 12 years experience in the Florida legislature. I, as you heard mentioned by Vera, was the first woman elected to lead the Senate Democrats. And I must tell you, when she talks about me working across the aisle, I had 12 Democrats out of 40 state senators. That's a minority. And you know, you don't have to be a math teacher to figure that one out. You've just got to work with other people across the aisle. And I was able to do that. And as I make some remarks here, you'll see that they focused a lot on issues of public education and health care, and trying to do the right thing for people in the state of Florida. And when people ask why I'm running, it's kind of for that reason. We've lost sight, I think, and that's what I hear from people all over the state of Florida in the over 325 visits that I've had, is that we're going in the wrong direction. You know, we need to be concerned about the interests, the best interests of the people, not the best interests of the special interests or corporations. So I'm happy to see so many people here because I know that each and every one of you is going to be involved in doing something extremely important, and that is making Rick Scott a one-term governor. Let me tell you that, as I mentioned, Florida has been on the wrong track for quite some time. During the time that I served in the legislature, I've never been in the majority. And I served under two Republican Speakers of the House, Tom Feeney and Johnny Byrd, if any of you know or remember either of them. That was quite a chore. I've served under 4 Republican Senate presidents and 3 Republican governors, Jeb Bush, Charlie Crist, and Rick Scott. We Democrats share a set of principles, and I think they're grounded in fairness and opportunity for all. That's why we fight for the Affordable Health Care Act, public education, higher minimum wage, social justice issues, environmental protection, ensuring that those of us at greatest risk, abused and neglected children, frail, elderly, and those unable to care for themselves, such as developmentally disabled, are not left behind. You know, there are a lot of reasons why I'm running for governor. One of them is that I believe every Floridian should have health care. And to me, it is morally reprehensible. And many of us in this room, myself included, are on Medicare. So we're not really the ones impacted by what happens with the Medicaid expansion, except for what happens in our hospitals. But let me just say that it is morally reprehensible when you have $51 billion that is Florida's share of the Medicaid expansion money under the Affordable Care Act, that you, legislature and governor, do not take that money for Floridians. 1.2 million Floridians that would have been covered by that money. And let me say that it's not only the money. This governor talks about being a jobs governor, jobs in the economy. Well, let me tell you, the University of Florida has a study that shows that 122,000 healthcare jobs, good paying jobs with benefits, would be created by drawing down that money for the providers that will need to be trained and recruited to cover the additional people that would have health care in this state. In addition to that, it was mentioned by Vera, my commitment to protecting women's rights. This is something that is, this is just a core value, a core principle. When I was the leader, in 2012 was the first year in many years, and unfortunately in 2013 they went back to doing the same thing, was the only year where we did not have a single piece of legislation hit the floor of the Senate, or was allowed to come to the floor of the Senate, that placed barriers in front of women's reproductive rights. This year, unfortunately, the governor yesterday signed a piece of legislation, again restricting women's reproductive rights. It changes basically the viability standards in the 3rd trimester. Many people believe it is unconstitutional, but it's passed to challenge Roe, because Roe does not allow for these viability standards to be changed. It takes away things like the health of the mother, the psychological issues, all of those kinds of things, and totally eliminates the opportunity for a woman to make that choice for herself. So this is one of the reasons why, I believe that we need a Democratic governor, and a Democratic governor that has a strong pro-choice commitment. Not one, thank you. You can be sure that unlike Rick Scott, that I would veto any legislation that came to my desk that restricts a woman's reproductive rights. I'm also running to make Florida's public schools among the best in the nation. It's very sad when you look at the statistics that Florida is 48th in state funding of public education and 50th, by the way, in funding of higher ed. And those are just facts. The 48th in state funding was put out by the Census Bureau, so it's a pretty valid statistic. One of the things that upsets me the most about what has been done with public education, well, there are two things. Education reform, which was started by Jeb Bush, moved forward by Charlie Crist, and now by Rick Scott. What was started by Jeb Bush was the corporate tax scholarship voucher program. Now, it started out at one level, and it was moved to the next level by Governor Crist, and now the bill is on the desk of Governor Scott to expand it even more. We are talking about, remember I just said 48th in the nation in funding, state funding. We are talking about, and this is in the analysis of the bill that was passed, says $3 billion in funding will go to private schools over the next 5 years. I'm sorry, but public dollars belong in public schools. And in addition to that, part of the reform has to do with high-stakes testing. And we need to reduce the emphasis on high-stakes testing at our schools. I had that conversation with Adrienne last night, who volunteers here in schools, and she was a teacher. The trauma that everybody goes through, and the fact that days and days of a school year, instead of children learning all kinds of things that they need to be learning, are focused on being taught to pass a test. That needs to stop. I'm also running for governor to fight for better jobs and better pay for working families. And among the issues there has to do with minimum wage. This past year, Senator Dwight Bullard, who has endorsed me, he is a senator from the South Florida area, and he filed a bill to increase the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour. Now, that's a start as far as I'm concerned. That's not a living wage. Right now, our minimum wage in this state is $7.93 an hour. 68% of people that earn that wage are women, many of them single moms. You can't raise a family. You can't provide for your family on that amount of wage. So we need to care more. Again, it's a democratic value, I see it. We need to care more about our working and middle-class families. I'm also running for governor because Florida's environment, our precious land and water resources are at great risk. One of the questions, by the way, that was sent to me by Mr. Jansen has to do with the sale of water resources to the Nestle Corporation, as an example. And, you know, the county, the company received a permit to take water belonging to Floridians, hundreds of millions of gallons a year, from the Madison Blue Springs, we checked that out, at no cost to Nestle, no taxes, no fees, just $230 permit to pump until 2018. Okay? Now let me just say, we have issues. The biggest issue in this state with environment is water resources. We can't let anybody be pumping out hundreds of millions of gallons a year, and we're worrying about where we're getting water resources for people, you know, to live and to have a sustainable life in Florida. I visited these Silver Springs and 5 other springs in Marion County and Alachua County. And I can tell you, it's devastating. When you look and see what has happened, the vegetation all around the springs is gone. it's a lot of it, the flow of the springs is diminished. This all affects our aquifer, which affects our drinking water. And I believe that that is the #1 environmental issue. And every issue, whether it's springs, whether it's the Indian River Lagoon, whether it's the Everglades, all of it ties into water resources. And that has to be the focus. And let me just mention, lastly, there are so many other issues, but I'm running for governor to fight for social justice and equality. And I want to say that I have been a champion of LGBT rights since, well, before I got to the legislature 12 years ago, but definitely throughout my 12 years as a legislator. For 7 years, I ran a bill in one form or another to eliminate the statute that we have, which said that same-sex couples could not adopt in the state of Florida. Now, I remind you that same-sex couples could be foster parents. So they were the foster parents, the good, excellent foster parents of children for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. And yet, when they wanted to adopt, they were told, no, you can't adopt, and we're going to remove those children and put them in another home. Think about that. The only loving, stable family that a child ever has known, they're going to be moved from that because the couple is same-sex. So I tried very hard. I knew it would never pass our legislature. But it was important to use it as an education tool. The first year I did it, I was in the House. I had one legislator standing next to me, Faye Culp, whose son happens to be gay. She's a Republican legislator. This is not about Republican, Democrat, although the votes seem to come down that way. But she stood next to me. We had a press conference and tried to bring light to this issue. 1 year in the Senate of the 7, the bill was actually heard. I ended up having to temporarily pass it because it would have failed on a 3-3 vote. But it was the most incredible experience with people coming to Tallahassee, friends, family, teachers, experts from around the nation to talk about this issue. It was one of the most moving experiences. And finally, in the 7th year, when I had the press conference, I had 23 legislators standing next to me. Not enough to pass the bill, but a recognition of the movement and the fact that people were beginning to understand the issue and that it was about children. So Judge Cindy Lederman wrote an incredible opinion in Dade County on the case that was taken up to the appellate court, and it was upheld. And so now, even though the statute is in the books, we couldn't, believe it or not, couldn't get the votes to take it out of the statutes, even though it's unconstitutional and has been ruled as such. But now, I have been in multiple courtrooms in South Florida, privileged to see the adoption of many of these children by the foster parents who love them and provided these incredible homes. So I think you can tell from the issues that I brought to you that I'm a Democrat, a lifelong Democrat that has a progressive record, and I'm very proud of it. You know, in recent years, we have shied away from nominating or promoting someone who has a progressive record. I think that's wrong, and I think that we've seen that. We have lost the last 3 elections based on that. Voters want someone who cares about them. I think they want someone who will do the right thing to make Florida a better place for everyone who lives here. And that's exactly what a progressive Democrat, I believe, fights for. So that's what I will fight for. Now, some people say, well, you know, how are you going to win? You're not as well known, obviously, as the current governor or the former governor, because they have much more name recognition. Well, I point to some of those leaders that I mentioned before, like a Bob Graham, a Ruben Askew, Lawton Chiles, and you know what? They all, when they ran statewide for the first time, they were little-known state senators, all of them. They had less name recognition and less money. And guess what? They all won. And I remind you of Congressman Cantor in Virginia. You know, it's not exactly comparable, but in some ways it is, because he had over $5 million plus whatever other monies were out there for him. And the economics professor at the university there had $200,000. But you know what? The economics professor went out, met with the people. He understood that you had to connect with the people. You can't lose sight of your constituency. And you also have to stand on your convictions. And that's what Eric Cantor wasn't doing. And this gentleman, I don't know what he'll do when he gets there, and I'm sure it's not going to be good. But I know that when I get there to be the governor of Florida, I will stand on my convictions. And I would be very proud to serve as a Democratic governor and the first woman governor of the state of Florida. Thank you.